Thank you for still being here. Okay, so this talk was a 30-minute talk that was already packed, so it's now a 20-minute ultra-packed talk. And it's actually a follow-up to another talk I did last year. So it builds on that talk, which is available online on YouTube, which is the opening plenary of IATEFL conference last year, where I talked about AI in general. And now I mentioned some of the issues I'm going to talk about today more in detail. And what I wanted to do was to be a little bit more positive, if you want, and say, okay, there's a whole lot of problems associated with AI, but these are some of the strategies so that we can move forward. So basically, I have identified 6 main issues with AI. And from the very beginning, what I'm going to say is, I don't think that I can stop AI. I don't have that superpower. I do think that there are a lot of issues. So what I do need is we need to learn about them, and we need to know what's happening in order to make informed decisions about how we use AI. So let's start with the first. The first is inherent biases and assumptions. There's a big problem with generative AI mostly, because AI is a bigger term, and today we'll be talking about generative AI, which is biases. And these biases stem from the data that has been used to train these models. You know, ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot and Google Gemini, they have all been trained on extensive data. And there's a saying that says, garbage in, garbage out. So the result of what we get is as good as the data these models have been trained on. And we don't know really what data they have been trained on. So there's no way we know whether it's quality data. So the first problem is the data. And the data it has been trained with has several problems. We'll talk about languages later when I talk about multilingual representation, but what language the data is in is one of the problems. Another problem is that has been identified in a book called Engines of Engagement, which is free. It's an ebook that you can look for, and it's quite interesting. It explains how AI works. Most of the data used to train these models comes from, the acronym is WEIRD, Western, Educated, Rich, Industrialized, Democratic cultures, and all the rest are excluded. So the results represent those models, which is not necessarily, especially for us in the Southern Hemisphere, our models. So that's the first problem. So we have a historical bias, representation, how it's measured, what sample has been used. And if you are into research, you know the sample is essential. Now, these biases manifest in the output that we get through discrimination, stereotyping, unequal performance of the models, and reinforcement of the existing inequalities. And I'll talk about inequalities more in a minute. So, lots of biases and assumptions. One very simple one, if I prompt an image generator and I tell it, not him, not her, I tell it to give me a picture of a doctor and a nurse, and I prompt various ones, and most of the times I will get a doctor that is male and white, and I will get a nurse that is female and probably not white. So, is it serious? Well, I think it is, because if we take it for granted that what we get is the reality, we are being misled, okay? All right, let's go to the second issue. The second issue is precise output. I have lots of stories about ChatGPT and Gemini and whatever giving me things that are not very precise. But basically, I have written books that I have not written, so maybe I could put that in my CV. It would look good, but no, I haven't. So lots of biases. We're talking again about the data quality. We're talking about data scarcity, and I will talk about that later when we talk about copyright. And that leads to hallucinations. So when the model does not, so first of all, artificial intelligence is not intelligent, I'm afraid, okay? It's just doing mathematical calculations based on the data it receives. It does not understand, it does not want to understand, okay? You don't need to say please and thank you because it makes no difference. It's a machine, a processor doing statistical correlations between in the data it has. And so when it does not find what it wants, instead of saying, oh, I don't know that, it just fills in the gaps with whatever it thinks should go there. And that's what's called hallucination. And since they say AI is a very big black box and there's no way to know what's inside and how it really works and where the data comes from and all of that, there's no way to know which bits are precise and which are not. So, my word of caution for all of you today is don't trust it. All right. Another problem is if we don't know how to prompt, ambiguous prompts will yield not very efficient results. Okay, let's go to our third issue. Our third issue is multilingual representation. And of course, I'm talking to a room where I assume most of you speak Spanish, but we are also interested in using this in English. And the difference is huge. And it is huge because 80% of the data that has been used to feed these models is English. And within English, it's not all the varieties of English. Do you think it's Australian English? Do you think it's South African English? Mostly American English, and British English is second. So 80% English, only accepted varieties of English. The rest are disregarded. And the rest, the 20% that's left, is divided into all the other world languages. So the results you get if you prompt in Spanish is directly related to the amount of data it has from Spanish, which is very little. So it then has to go and translate and do machine translation for the information it has in English. So we are adding extra layers of imprecision as we speak. So multilingual representation is a huge problem. Another problem is, as I said, it does not understand. So it does not understand cultural nuances, contextual information. It's literal. So multilingual representation is still a very big, important issue with AI. Issue number 4 is data privacy and copyright. And so let's take data privacy first. How the companies are collecting data, Do you know? I would say the freer the tool, the more data they collect. The more data you're giving away, because you know these companies are not altruistic. They don't give you something for free just because, okay? So the freer the tool, you're giving away a lot of your data for them to retrain their models. How do they use the data? So this is a big problem. And we would want to have privacy by design, which is everything is private unless, not by default, not privacy by default, the other way around, privacy by default. And transparency and consent on how they collect the data and use the data. But again, that is very obscure, and it's very difficult to know how they are doing that. The other problem is copyright. And with copyright, we have two issues. The first is that most of the models have been trained on data that is copyrighted without permission. So for example, the New York Times is suing OpenAI and Microsoft because they have used their whole database of news to train the models without permission. And so far, many of these trials, many of these cases that are in court have not been solved yet. But eventually, if somebody decides that they cannot use that data because it's private, because it's copyrighted, and they ask ChatGPT and Gemini and all the models to remove all the information that they have used without permission, I would say that there would be almost nothing left. And so everything would crumble, okay? So we will need to wait a couple of years to see what happens, but this could be the collapse of the model. The other problem is when you, as a user, use AI, what you get, is it yours? Do you have copyright over that? If you generate an image, can you publish that image saying you did it? So this is a huge problem because, as we say, everything is based on the same database. So if Eugenia prompts an image generator and Diana another and Euge another, and they get different but yet similar stuff because it's all derivative from the same data, and you decide to publish that, and she publishes that, and she publishes that, and it's all very similar. So you could be open to potential infringement of copyright. So to be on the safe side, you don't own the copyright. Don't publish any of that, okay? Issue number 5, and one of my most important concerns, is the environmental impact of AI. And there are 4 aspects of this impact. The first is energy consumption. You can see the numbers there. They are huge, they are very discouraging, but the processing units need for AI processing are not the same that we use in a normal computer. They are called GPUs, and they waste a lot more energy than the ones we use. Of course, more carbon dioxide emissions. 2.5 to 3.7% of the total greenhouse gases come from AI these days, and it's more than the aviation industry. And I remember when they would tell us, don't fly because it's bad for the environment. But now everybody is prompting ChatGPT. And this is even worse. Water consumption. We need water, they need water to cool down the data centers. Loads and loads of water. Fresh water, not salt water, not used water. Fresh water. Okay. The last is e-waste. I said that we need these specific graphic processing units, and these are worn out much faster. So there's going to be a lot more of e-waste because of the use of all these components in the AI industry. So overall, this is a huge problem. The last issue is access and equity. And this is related to what we have access to, and it's related to our economic inequalities. It's also related to research. 23% of research is carried by the United States, about 15% by China, South America, Africa, and the rest of the Asian countries only account for 5% of the research. So we are already at a huge disadvantage, both economically and in research. And so the gap keeps widening. They do more research, they have better understanding of everything, and we are left behind. Okay, enough of the bad news. I'm sorry to be such a downer. So what do we do? Do we just go home, never touch AI again? I mean, the truth is, I wish I could stop it, but I can't. So what I think we should do is we need to understand where we are to see how we can do it better. So first, guidelines for responsible use. We need all educational institutions, many of them have already done it, but if you work in an institution and you don't have a code of conduct, all educational institutions need to have their code of conduct for responsible use of AI. And this is going to be different whether it is primary, secondary, higher education, etc. This should look at capabilities, limitations, and privacy concerns when integrating AI. And funnily enough, this week, I had a meeting with somebody from Canada who were asking for my advice. And so they were telling me that the government has issued guidelines for educational institutions that are at national level. And I said, could you please share those with me because I would be interested in reading them. And they said, yes, we will. But in the meantime, what they told me is that the guidelines say no student facing AI at all. You cannot do an activity with AI where the students use the AI, at least in the classroom. We all know that our students go home and they still use AI. But you as a teacher in the classroom, you shouldn't be using AI. You can use AI to create a lesson plan, but not the students. So I found it interesting that it was so, prohibitive. But so I see different countries will be, analyzing this and choosing the path. But I was surprised to hear that. So this is an example of a code of conduct in Washington. And I know you're not going to be able to read, but a little bit of what I was interested is so it outlines student responsibilities, and then it says AI levels, and it says AI recommended, AI permitted, or AI restricted. And so what the teachers do is they say, for this task, they assign one of the three levels. For this task, AI is restricted. You cannot use it in any way. For this task, AI is permitted, but you need to quote whatever you are using it for. For this task, AI is recommended, and you should use it in this way. And so what they are saying is, there are certain uses that will be acceptable, but not all of them. The second strategy is AI literacy, and AI literacy for all. Because first we need to learn about it, and then we need to teach our students about it. And this should be raising awareness on issues, fostering active and critical thinking of AI outputs. There are already a lot of already made tasks for AI literacy, such as this one, where you have lessons already planned for you if you want to take them to your classroom. So you can just do a Google search, and I'm going to go back to that a little bit later. Third strategy is identifying the positive uses of AI. AI is good for some things, but not for everything. So don't use it for everything. The same way you don't use a screwdriver for everything. Sometimes you need a hammer, right? So AI is not good for everything. So we will need to take time to decipher what it's good for. I have my own ideas, but I guess everyone will have to do their own thinking and see what they get. Based on that, select the most effective AI tools for what you want to do. You don't need ChatGPT for everything. There are smaller models that can do the task you want, and smaller models are more effective, a little bit less of an impact on the environment, so use smaller models. Image generators are terrible, no matter what. So if you can avoid generating images on AI, especially for fun. Oh, I'm gonna try this. Okay, please don't. And then explore non-AI tools. How did we live 3 years ago without AI? Can you imagine? Didn't we go online and say, can you find me a tool to do this? And it was not AI. So we should go back to that, okay? You don't need AI for everything. You don't need AI to ask, hey, ChatGPT, what's the best Italian restaurant in Buenos Aires? You can Google that, okay? Very simple. At ChatGPT, it was when I talked about environmental impact, but I didn't draw attention to it. A ChatGPT query emits 4.32 grams of carbon dioxide. A Google search is 0.2. Please keep Googling if you can, okay? ChatGPT does not have the answer to everything. All right. And of course, as we were talking about the huge gap, we need to be doing more research. If we don't do it, nobody's going to do it for us, okay? So we need to be doing more research here in the South. I think these are some positive uses of AI. To classify data, to find patterns, to recommend, and for creative tasks. Definitely not for precision. All right. Last strategy, prompting. We all need to learn to prompt. Better prompting leads to better results. Learn to prompt. Refine your prompts before prompting. I mean, I ask something and then I say, oh, I forgot to say something, so you reprompt. Oh, but I should add this, and you reprompt. Do your thinking through on paper or on a Google Doc before you prompt. And when you prompt, try to have a rounded prompt that will work so that you avoid reprompting and wasting precious resources. And if you find a prompt that works really well, make a bank of your effective prompts and keep them safe somewhere. And if you can, share them with your colleagues. Oh, you know, I tried this and it worked really well. Share it. Because it's difficult to find good prompts. However, there are some banks already yes, with good prompts. So you need to know what you want. So that's the first thing. If you don't know what you want, forget about it. Give ChatGPT a role, provide context, details, and maybe this wastes a little bit more, but then you can engage in a kind of conversation with it. Let me see if I have that. So that's a 6-step prompt checklist if you want to build a prompt. Give the task, the context, you may give an example, say who, the role, what persona, is it a teacher, is it an expert, is it an accountant, who is speaking? Yes, what's the format? Do you want a paragraph, 200-word paragraph? I want a bullet list, I want a table. Maybe you can even add the tone if you're asking for a paragraph. I want a friendly, I want a formal paragraph. And those are the references because they are like 3 A4 pages of references. So I couldn't put them in, sorry. So if you scan that, you get all the references for all the information I have been sharing. You can find me there, and I am willing to engage in conversation with anybody who wants to. Thank you very much for having me.